we need to be careful when we talk about the rich. So if you take a banker receiving a bonus of £1 million, that bonus is subject to 15% employer national insurance. And then in the banker's hands, it's subject to 45% income tax and 2% national insurance. So overall, that's a rate of about something like 55%. I think that's fine. I wouldn't put that up. On the other hand, you'd have someone in private equity, say, who makes £1 million, and they're taxed on that now at the rate of, can I get the rate right? It's just changed, I think 34%. So why is that? Why are they paying a lower rate? Is it that we think private equity is more socially useful than banking?
They would say so, but a doctor's pretty useful.
And, well, exactly. I mean, if we were to draw up a profession who we want to attract people in the UK by cutting their tax, and I gave you 100 professions to fill in, do you think private equity would be on the list?
No. Podcasters. Right at the top.
Yeah, but you don't have the ear of the Treasury. If you did, then podcasters would get a 5% tax rate, but you don't.
No.
So... Or what about someone who inherits £1 million? Someone who inherits £1 million could very often pay no inheritance tax or any other tax on that at all. So we need to be very careful about saying we're taxing the rich.
Can we talk about rich? Let's talk about the royal family then, as like that kind of rich.
The royal family is... I think not, I'm going to be really annoying and not answer your question. I think it's not a useful thing to look at because that's dominated by a difference between what's regarded as crown property, which isn't taxed, and their personal property that is. And that's something that doesn't apply to anyone else. And the amounts involved are large enough for me to be very happy if I had them, but they're not large enough to make a difference to tax.
What about like a Grosvenor estate then?
Okay, Grosvenor estate, that's
kind of like, the aristocracy of the UK. Or...
Yeah, so how come the Grosvenor estate pays so little tax? How come you can have dukes inheriting it one after the other and very little inheritance tax coming out? It's often said that's because of trusts. That's not right. I mean, trusts pay inheritance tax. They pay it every 10 years. They pay a 6% charge. So a big reason is the complete exemption from inheritance tax on agricultural property and business property. That has just been, broadly speaking, cut in half. So they are now going to be paying a bit more tax. It's not clear to me why they still get a 50% exemption. I mean, there is a pretty good argument for a small farmer or a small business owner having a lower rate of inheritance tax. When you're talking about many tens, hundreds of millions, even billions, that argument goes away. And inheritance tax wasn't originally introduced. The original estate taxes weren't introduced to raise money. They were introduced because it was thought to be bad for the country. You had large estates permanently owning huge tracts of land. And that clearly failed because 150 years later, we still have large estates owning very large tracts of land. So yeah, absolutely it makes sense to rationalise huge swathes of inheritance tax. And I've written about how to do that. So this is the boring answer. If you want to tax the rich more and more effectively and more fairly, the answer is looking at every tax that we have that applies to them, looking at where it's paid, where it's not paid, and fixing it. And you can raise 20, 30 billion by doing that systematically if you want to. But it's kind of boring and doesn't make for good posters. How much more fun to talk about a wealth tax and then ignore all the detail? That's what makes me angry about these campaigners, that they have large PR budgets, they have excellent media access, far more than me, and yet they're wasting their time, pissing their resources up the wall, arguing for things that will never happen. Pointless, absolutely pointless.
But to play devil's advocate, I do think that people get on board with the tax the wealthy because I think you said it, Albert Einstein said that tax is the hardest thing for someone to understand, to comprehend.
Yeah.
So, but the people that benefit from the complexity of the tax system tend to be the wealthy because they know, they understand, they know people like you, they understand the loopholes, how they can save money. Whereas the average person, for example, I just started using an accountant for my taxes because I'm self-employed now. Whereas before I was PAYE, so I didn't worry about it. And my accountant, I did my own taxes last year. He did it this year. And I just found out from him that because I work from home, I can count my property as my office, so I get some of my money back because I work from home, so that's my office, so it counts as some of my rent money gets taken off my tax. But I didn't know that, my accountant knew that. So the average person who's just doing their taxes doesn't know these things. So they don't benefit from all these loopholes, which is why people are like, tax the wealthy, they're dodging tax, they're avoiding tax, they're smart, they know how to get the loopholes, whereas the average person on like 80 grand, 50 grand, 100 grand is just paying their tax.
Sure, but then if you're running a multi-million pound media campaign on this, you should be saying, let's close this loophole, identify a loophole, shut it. Simplification, let's simplify. And then you can pursue something that actually might happen. Pursue wealth taxes. You're wasting your time. It's not going to happen, because even though your campaign is missing all the details that explain why a wealth tax isn't going to work, policymakers know that. No political party is going to adopt it. The Treasury knows why these taxes don't work. So it's really frustrating to see time and money being spent on campaigns that aren't going to achieve
Maybe
anything.
it's the political will that you pointed to that was needed. So maybe, like the outcome of these campaigns is not that we get a wealth tax, it's we get a population who go, we need to do something about taxation.
But it's not, you see. It could be saying, you could imagine a very long-term campaign to persuade people that if you want better public services, you have to pay for them. But that's not it. The campaigns are, if you want better public services, we can magic them by taxing the rich in a way no other country's ever done it. And that is, it ends up creating an anti-tax attitude where people who think that they're left-wing and think they believe in a better welfare state resent tax and don't think they should ever pay more tax.
That was a clip from our chat with tax expert Dan Needle. If you want to watch the full episode, you can click right here.